Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today we're unpacking the mind of someone who literally helped build the modern world, John Locke. If you want to understand where constitutional government comes from, or the very concept of human rights, this is absolutely where we have to start. So let's just jump right in. Think about this fundamental question for a second. Where do our basic rights actually come from? Are they just this inherent gift from nature, existing way before any laws or constitutions were ever written? Or are they simply permissions handed out by the government? Permissions that, honestly, could be just as easily taken away. It's a massive question, and how we answer it completely dictates where our modern freedoms truly originate.
Okay, let's dive into this. We'll start with a state of nature, then move into life, liberty, and property. From there, we'll look at the power of consent, inspiring the revolutions, contradictions and critiques, and finally wrap up with an enduring legacy.
Section 1. The state of nature, chaos versus reason.
So to figure out why government exists at all, Locke asks us to imagine a hypothetical time before political societies even existed. And the contrast between how two philosophical heavyweights viewed this state of nature is just fascinating. You got to remember the 17th century context here. Thomas Hobbes lived through the bloody chaos of the English Civil War. So he looked at a world without government and saw a terrifying, brutal war of all against all. For Hobbes, you absolutely needed an absolute ruler, a leviathan, to keep people from destroying each other. But John Locke? He was writing a bit later, during a more stable period, and he looked at that exact same hypothetical state of nature and saw something entirely different. He had this incredible, optimistic belief that free and equal individuals are inherently governed by natural law and reason. He argued that we don't actually need a tyrant to maintain peace, because our own reason guides us to respect one another. It's a totally different vibe.
Section 2. Life, liberty, and property. The Lockean triad.
This brings us right to the absolute core of Locke's entire political framework. The crucial point here is that Locke believed every single human being is born with three inalienable natural rights. The right to life, which means an existence free from harm. The right to liberty, meaning freedom of action and thought. And the right to property. But wait, how do you actually get property in nature? Well, Locke argued that when you mix your own physical labor with the natural world, say, tilling a field or picking fruit from a tree, you make it your own. It's your labor that creates a sacred private property right, and that right exists completely independent of any government.
But here's where it gets interesting, because this concept evolves dramatically. In step 1, Locke argued there were natural limits. Basically, you should only take what you can use before it spoils. You couldn't hoard apples if they were just going to rot on the ground. But then we hit step 2. The invention of money. Things like gold and silver don't spoil, right? Which means they allow for the permanent storage of wealth. And that fundamentally changes the game, leading right into step 3, a massive shift toward unlimited accumulation. By introducing money, Locke's initial natural limits on property were totally removed, opening the philosophical door to unlimited wealth generation.
Section 3. The power of consent, from nature to society.
Now, this begs a really important question. If the state of nature was so peaceful and reasonable, why on earth would anyone ever leave it? The answer is that we needed an impartial judge to protect those newly defined property rights we just talked about. But how do we actually agree to this government today? I mean, we didn't sign a physical contract when we were born. Locke solved this with a brilliant concept called tacit consent. Essentially, you give implied consent to obey a government's laws simply by being within and enjoying its territory. So whether you own a home, rent an apartment, or are literally just driving down a public highway, your presence alone means you accept the daily obligation to obey the law of that land. And because government is created purely by our consent, it has strict, absolute limits. As Locke wrote, government power is strictly held in trust. It exists solely for the preservation of our rights. If a ruler breaks that trust and tries to destroy, enslave, or impoverish the subjects, that ruler becomes illegitimate. This was huge. It established the incredibly radical idea that citizens retain the natural right to rebel against tyranny.
Section 4. Inspiring the revolutions, putting philosophy into practice.
Let's move on and see how this builds from abstract 17th century philosophy into a massive, real-world force that shaped global constitutions. In 1689, Locke identifies our core rights as life, liberty, and property. Less than a century later, in 1776, Thomas Jefferson drafts the American Declaration of Independence, arguing for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson effectively took Locke's framework, modified one single word, and used it to justify an entire revolution against the British Crown. It's pretty amazing to see that direct lineage. But his influence definitely didn't stop in America. Locke's concepts deeply shaped the French Declaration of the Rights of Man. They're highly visible in the Indian Constitution, where Articles 19 and 21 protect personal liberty and freedom of speech. And fast forward to 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, drafted by figures like John Humphrey, beautifully bridges Locke's early first-generation civil liberties with modern international law. These core concepts literally shaped democratic rule all over the globe. Section 5, Contradictions and Critiques. The flaws in the framework. Now, to truly understand Locke, we must impartially examine the historical controversies of his theories, the yes-but side of his legacy. And there is a profound tension here. Remember Locke's labor theory? He argued that you claim property by making productive use of the land through agriculture. Well, historically, European colonizers used this specific definition to justify taking land from indigenous communities. The argument they made was that because indigenous peoples didn't enclose and farm the land in the European style, they weren't using it productively and therefore had no valid Lockean claim to it. So tragically, a philosophy of universal rights was utilized to justify massive dispossession. Furthermore, modern thinkers like C.B. Macpherson have raised the critique of what he calls possessive individualism. Macpherson argues that Locke's system assumes a tabula rasa, this blank slate of equality where everyone supposedly has an equal chance to accumulate wealth. But critics point out that this theoretical equality actually masks systemic impediments in the real world. Ultimately, they argue, it prioritizes personal wealth accumulation over true social equality, creating an unequal playing field that's justified by the language of natural rights.
Section 6. An enduring legacy. Locke in the modern world.
Despite these deep contradictions and historical critiques, Locke's centuries-old ideas still actively structure the world we navigate every single day. Just think about it. Whenever you vote in an election, whenever you sign a contract, or exercise your right to free speech or religion, you're actively participating in a Lockean framework of tacit consent. We expect our governments to be impartial administrators of justice precisely because Locke argued government is just a neutral protector of our pre-existing rights. I want to conclude with a provocative thought for you to ponder. Can the Lockean right to unlimited private property ever truly be reconciled with the modern goal of social equality? Or will these two ideals always be in tension? It's a debate that started way back in the 1600s, and it's playing out in our courts and legislatures right now. Thank you so much for engaging with this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible ideas that shape our world.